Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I'm now very happy to have the chance to transition from dance as culture diplomacy to music as culture diplomacy, with two, I think, very powerful examples of really how one can bring people together through music, even in places and situations where many have given up or many think there's nothing that can be done. And something that's really also of sincere interest for myself. An issue I've been struggling with a lot also at ICD, where is culture diplomacy possible and where is it not possible? And I think the examples we're about to witness really will show us that even in very, very difficult situations, some progress and some inroads can be made using music as a form of cultural diplomacy. I'm happy now to introduce Mr. Amitai Gross, who's the Executive Director of Music in the Key of Peace, based primarily in the USA and Israel. He became an ordained Magid in the Hasidic tradition, also has a BA in Music and Conflict Resolution at Bennington College. He founded Music in the Key of Peace as a student, which began by taking a video camera and flying to Israel and hitchhiking around the country for 7 weeks, looking for individuals, organizations, and peace groups who use music to build dialogue between Jews and Arabs. He's also a composer, a singer, a songwriter, and a multi-instrumentalist. The topic that he's going to be speaking on today is music as mediation, transcending political borders, building relationships. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a very, very warm welcome for Mr. Amitai Gross.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Again, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Okay, I'm going to have to ask you to join me in a little bit of an experiment. It is a participatory experiment, so I'm going to need 100% participation. 100% participation. Can I have that? Say yes.
Yes.
Can I have that? Say yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Please give me your wallets. No, I'm just kidding. Everyone, please rise, if you will. Thank you. Quick, quick, up, up, up. And what I want you to do is first take in one deep breath on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, 1 deep breath. Hold it. And breathe out. Now one big breath again. 1, 2, 3. Hold it. And breathe out. One more. If you relax your shoulders a little bit, stretch them back if you will. Make sure not to bump anybody around you. If you'd be so kind, please raise your arms up as high as you can, if you would. Yes? All right. Stretch, stretch, stretch. And put your left hand on top of your head. And your right hand, do something like this. Good. Hold that for just a second. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Everyone can drop that. And if you give me one of these, just a quick one of those. Don't bump anybody next to you. There we go. Good, good, good. All right. Let's get our lungs working a little bit better. If we could all intone together, just one note all together. Ready? Good, good, excellent, excellent. Wow, you guys are very musical. Good, here comes the real experiment. You can sit down. Here comes the real experiment. I'm going to ask you all to sing. Now you have 5 seconds to panic and freak out. Ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good. Now you all get to sing. I asked for 100% participation because the way that this is not frightening is if we're all doing it together. All right? So all of us together, we're just going to sing something very simple. Don't freak out. Don't worry. No one's judging you. No one's watching you because they're all looking at me. So it's a very simple melody, and I'll help you out with it. I'm just going to sing it once, and you'll be able to get it, and then you'll sing it with me. So it goes like this. Excellent. What you just experienced was a melody. And a melody is simple. You might say that that was a pretty melody, if you were so kind to me. It's something that in the world of composition, the world of music theory, we call it horizontal music. And the reason we call it horizontal music is because it's measured by time. We measure it by one note to the next note as you read it on sheet music. Horizontal music is also very stagnant. It stays in one place. There there isn't necessarily collaboration, there isn't necessarily self-awareness, there isn't a unique quality to it because everyone's doing the exact same thing. So I'm going to ask you to do something a little bit different. Now we're going to pull in harmony, which is the part of music that we call vertical. And I'll explain that in a bit. So what we're going to do is this group over here. We're going to sing that melody again. I'm going to bring it down a little bit lower because that one was a little bit lower. Okay? No? Technically, we refer to it as vertical music. And the reason why we refer to it as vertical music is because you put one note above another, and you create this, this collage we call polyphony, multiple moving melodies at a time, or homophony, where you have one moving melody and multiple notes that support that melody. All right? But beyond that technical understanding of vertical music, there's also the existential understanding of what is vertical music. When we sing together as a group, adding our own unique tone, adding our own unique melodies, bringing them together to create a more beautiful piece, you could say. We just work towards, am I out? All right. What we've just done is we work towards a higher purpose. And that higher purpose is mutually supportive. That higher purpose is mutually supportive. What we've done is we've taken our own melody and rather than, okay, all right. Rather than battling with each other, we've used these melodies to sustain the other melody. We've used it to help, what am I looking for? We've used it to improve that past melody. And it's through our own unique diversity, through bringing those melodies together, that we've created a much greater piece. Also, when you're singing with another person, as a group, working to create the greater piece, working for that higher purpose, boundaries are broken. Now what we have is a mutually supportive relationship. There's no battle between us. Instead, we've come together to work for something that's above ourselves. And now that's what matters, not whatever boundary exists between us. As a mediator, that moment of accepting each other and wanting to help each other is the part that I have to focus on the most. Real quickly, I want to explain a little bit about mediation. in the realm that I work in the Middle East, there are many different forms of mediation all throughout the world. And especially in the Middle East, there are quite a few actually that have come from the Arabic traditions as well as from the Jewish traditions. The form of mediation that I actually focus on is Quaker mediation, which is probably the most common in the United States as well as throughout the world. It's now something that we use throughout the US court system, actually, primarily in small claims court as well as divorce court, but it's something that we use as an alternative to standing in front of a judge. And the reason is because mediation offers the opportunity for, first of all, every involved party to have their say. It's crucial to have everyone who's affected by whatever the conflict may be present in order to share their narrative and engage in the dialogue that is mediation. And the reason is because in the understanding of conflict resolution, particularly in the theory of intractable conflicts or things that are impossible, we understand that peace, or this state of equilibrium, really has two forms. We have negative peace, and negative peace simply means the absence of violence, is all it is. It's not sustainable. It's simply an agreement that we won't harm each other. But you never know when that agreement will end. So what we really go for, or what we really strive for in the realm of mediation, is the positive peace. And the positive peace is a cultural respect for each other, is a deep-seated, sustainable, peaceful coexistence. The analogy that I like to use on why we would rather go for a positive peace over a negative peace works better in the US, so I'm going to use one that's a little bit more international. When playing on a soccer field, it's far easier to make a goal when you're a couple meters away from the goalkeeper than it is if you're all the way on the other side of the field. And that's the difference between a negative peace and a positive peace. A negative peace is this idea that we can make a peace treaty and then hope that the people will stick to it. It's far less sustainable than let's get all the people to stick to it and then we'll write up that peace treaty. Quaker mediation, the mediation process works in 3 stages. The first stage is the narrative. Now the narrative, what it is it's an opportunity for each conflicting party, I guess, to share their entire story uninterrupted. They have the floor for as long as they need it to completely share their own narrative, their own understanding of the conflict and their own side. While they do that, it gives them an opportunity to actually commit to their story emotionally. Now that they have the opportunity to share their entire narrative, it becomes their own. They have to own up to it. But as well, they start to share values that may have not been brought up before, values that they may not have shared before, and it gives the opportunity for the listener, the other conflicting party or parties, to actively listen. In some circles, it's called compassionate listening. We just prefer to call it active listening because it's the opportunity to pay attention to every single detail in that person's narrative and to really understand what the values are coming out of there. After each party has had the opportunity to share their narrative, then we move on to the dialogue. The dialogue between these conflicting parties is now far more informed because everyone's had the opportunity to hear each side. There isn't any confusion over what the values are, but it gives them an opportunity to ask questions to further clarify. So what they do is they go back and forth asking questions on an equal playing field. Now that everyone has, in a sense, aired their dirty laundry, they have an opportunity to reach each other on this equal playing field where you don't have an oppressor and the oppressed. You don't have the plaintiff and the defendant. You simply have people who are at an imbalance with each other, and now they're given the opportunity to reach that state of equilibrium. Through asking questions, through building this dialogue, what they do is they start to establish what are the core values, what are the important points for us. And then after they've done that, the next stage we call the contract. And the contract is a unanimous agreement between the parties to do something about this conflict, whatever it may be. The great thing about this contract is that it is not a compromise. In the world of Quaker mediation, we understand that compromise is a dirty word. We don't like that word because when you compromise, you've given up something important to you. A compromise is never a win-win situation. It's always a lose-lose situation. No one's happy with what happened. So instead, we prefer to call it collaborative. When you're collaborating, much like when you're harmonizing, instead of giving away some of the strength of your side or giving away some of your core values, what you've done is you've reached to the other side and you've said, I understand what you need, you understand what I need. How do we make those happen together? How do we both live on happily without having to compromise our core values? Furthermore, another format of conflict resolution that I've involved myself in is the reparative justice model, which is based off of the Native American model of conflict resolution. And what we understand in reparative justice is that when, let's say, a crime is committed or when one person is wronged, there's an imbalance has been created. And so what we want to do is reestablish that balance between the parties. We want to be able to put both parties on an equal playing field, and that's what the contract does. It's putting both parties in a place where they are both content with however they're going to move on, and they haven't had to compromise their values at all. Musically, how do we do this? What's the, how do we make the mediation model work in a musical sense? Just to very briefly explain my organization. Music in the Key of Peace began, like Mark said, as a project that I did. I flew into Tel Aviv. I had 7 weeks off from school, so I grabbed a video camera and hitchhiked and bussed and all that sort of stuff across the country. I slept on a lot of couches at a lot of strangers' houses and found my way to different groups or individuals who were using music in some fashion to build that dialogue. I had never touched a video camera in my life before that experience. I had never been involved in any sort of editing before. I had been an actor for a long time, but I had never been the person behind the technical aspect of the camera. So not only was this a completely uncomfortable experience as somebody who didn't have a place to stay many nights or was hitchhiking most of the way everywhere, and also didn't have most of the connections. They were all established, like the connections of who I would be filming. Most of those were established when I got there. But along with that, I had no idea how to use the equipment that I had in my hands. But it moved on, whatever it did, it progressed, and I eventually came back. I had about 14 or 15 hours of footage that I somehow trimmed down into an hour-long film, and from that grew this organization. And what our main focus is to promote and to advocate for the philosophy and the strategies that are used by these groups and these individuals that I met while I was there. The reason why I started focusing on music, now I believe that grassroots creative efforts of all forms are very, very effective. Music is just so multifaceted, though. It's such an effective way to reach out to people, to connect with people emotionally as well as intellectually. So in the process of mediation, we find the narrative in music through performance. This performance is an opportunity for conflicting parties or for anyone who feels disenfranchised or who hasn't been listened to finally share their story that no one wants to listen to, or no one has ever given them the opportunity to share. Preferably, that performance is socially conscious. That's the main focus that we're looking for, is groups who are using their music to promote a socially conscious message. And this music, this narrative, this performance empowers the parties who are sharing whatever their story is. We often find that the disenfranchised throughout the world, one of the greatest venues for them to finally have their voices heard and finally feel like people actually care about what they have to say is through music, through their own performance. We saw that particularly in the United States with the rise of hip-hop. After the civil rights movement, really, there was sort of a limbo where there wasn't a very empowering venue for the disenfranchised black community in the United States. So what we saw were people like this guy and these guys who were able to progress a socially conscious message, whether it's something to agree with or not to agree with, depending on who you are, but they were able to finally share their story in a way that they hadn't had before. And it was through hip-hop that they were finally heard. And now it's become probably the greatest venue for that sort of narrative, particularly for the black community. One that strikes a little closer to home for me, as somebody who's grown up as a Jew in the modern world, is this guy, Matthew Miller, also known as Matisyahu, who did something that my generation thought very impossible. He made Jewish messages in music an actually attractive thing, which they never were before. Generally, we weren't a big fan of Jewish music because it wasn't cool. There wasn't a cool aspect. Nobody cared. It wasn't something that reached out to everyone. Then this guy came along, and he shared his message, whatever it was, whether it was religious, whether it was social, whether it was it was just a desire to be heard. And he did it in such a way where not only Jews wanted to listen to it, but all of the world was listening to him, wanted to hear his music because it was just very appealing and very cool music. So that's the way that it becomes an empowering, that music really empowers the people who haven't been able to share their message before. Then what we do is we reach into the dialogue stage. So the dialogue comes through communal music making. Communally, or in terms of music, we see communal music. We see coming together to make music together, to empower each other throughout almost every single culture in the world. We see it a lot in traditional tribal African cultures. We see it a lot in Native American culture. We see it a lot all throughout Asia. It's such a communal thing. It's something where everyone can come together and they can just play their hearts out. In the modern world, we see it through the jam session. And the jam session is an opportunity for people to come together and play on an equal field. Some may be better than others, but the great thing about a jam session is your virtuosity doesn't necessarily take away from others. A good jammer is somebody who's able to use their skill to improve others' abilities or to improve others' music. So this communal aspect, it gives an opportunity for us to empower each other. It's a mutually empowering experience. I spoke too soon, look at that. Furthermore, what you get from those jam sessions or what you get through communal music making is the beginning of this nonverbal communication between the musicians. What's really remarkable is how quickly two musicians, no matter how advanced they may be, once they've been playing with each other, they start to develop a language. And it's a language, they don't say anything, maybe it's a head nod, or maybe it's just understanding what the other's going to do because you've been playing with them for the past 20, 30 minutes, or 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it may be. That nonverbal communication is where we find that higher purpose, that deeper understanding of each other, where no longer is there some sort of barrier between us. We're not thinking about these other conflicts. All we're thinking about is what's he going to do next, what's she going to do next, and what can I do that'll sound good with that. This dance that occurs between the musicians, the 2, 3, 4, however many people there are, it's something that we see a lot in music, but we also see it in a lot of other art forms. We see it in dance especially. We also see it a lot in athletics. Just watching a basketball game, a soccer game, you understand how the players just know what the other is going to do. I always like to use baseball as an analogy, but we're in Europe, so who knows? But that experience, seeing those athletes who just are so conscious of where their teammates are so conscious of exactly how they need to get the ball or whatever to their teammate, is really just an amazing thing to watch. There's no talking involved, and yet everyone knows what the other is going to do. And the same thing exists in that jam session or in that communal music making. So what we do when we have the nonverbal communication, we've achieved a purpose that's higher than ourselves. And that moment of collaboration is when we realize that nothing else exists. All we have is where we are right now. It's a very visceral, emotional experience. Also through that, what they're able to do is cast aside any of these sorts of boundaries. One of my favorite experiences when I was filming my documentary, I was filming a choir, which I'll tell you about a little bit later, a choir of all high school-aged Jewish and Arab girls. They're Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Druze, Bedouins, all the different groups that are there. They're ages 13 to 19 tops, and they're just this phenomenal choir. They're a choir of girls who come together and they sing together, which creates that barrier-breaking experience. And in fact, one of my favorite lines actually in my documentary is one of the girls in the choir. She's an Arabic girl, I believe Arabic Muslim girl, who shared that when we in Israel, she said, in Israel we feel often like there's a wall between us. And this group meets in the Lower Galilee. Now the Lower Galilee in the Jezreel Valley, it's arguably probably the most integrated area in Israel, where people just have to interact on a very regular basis. They go into each other's stores. Many of them will work together, whatever it may be. It's one of the more integrated spots in Israel. However, there's still this barrier between them. Even though they have to interact on a daily basis, there's still this feeling of separation, of difference. And she said that every day she deals with that barrier, feeling like there's this wall between them. And yet when she comes together with this group and just sings with them, that wall doesn't exist anymore. It's like they just shattered that wall entirely. So the question to ask after that whole diatribe is, who cares? Why does this even matter? Why does this help at all, and how does it help? The question I actually prefer to ask, I had a finance professor in college who taught us to always ask the question, cui bono, or who benefits? And in case he sees this video, gong, I was paying attention. So the question is, who actually benefits from this? First of all, I'm sure if you're here at this conference, then you'll all agree with me that creative grassroots efforts really provide that bottom-up, sustainable, positive peace that eventually can reach a political support, can reach the political sector. But it begins with those grassroots efforts starting with the people. Peace treaties don't make people get along. People getting along make peace treaties. That's essentially how it works the best. We can understand from looking at the situation between Israel and Jordan, for example. Israel and Jordan have had a peace treaty for a while now. That doesn't necessarily mean that Israelis and Jordanians feel very comfortable around each other, or Israel and Egypt. It doesn't necessarily mean that Israelis, especially with a regime change, you never know what's if it's going to be sustainable. So a peace treaty in a non-sustainable sense is almost just lip service if we don't build it from a grassroots effort. Furthermore, when we work with music, and this wasn't necessarily intentional, but I'm starting to think that I should make it intentional, all of the groups that my organization has focused on and has looked at work with children. And when we use these creative efforts, when we use these grassroots efforts, you affect the children the most. And they're really the most important group to reach out to. There's this idea that we need to make a better future for the children, which is a silly concept, because we're not going to do it. The children are going to do it. So rather, we should just help the children make the better future for us. So one of the groups that I've worked with, or I've gotten the experience of briefly interacting with, is Heartbeat Jerusalem. And I'm not going to speak too much about Heartbeat, just because Aaron here is going to speak about them pretty shortly. But one of the amazing things about Heartbeat is that they interact both in the narrative aspect and in the dialogue aspect of mediation. The dialogue they create when they have their summer camps or their jam sessions or their open mic nights or whatever, and people have the opportunity to come together, play music together. Aaron will tell you more later, but these kids are all high school aged, and they're mostly working with hip-hop music, with rock, jazz, metal influences and everything like that, but they all bring their own language to these jam sessions or whatever, and they have the opportunity to interact with each other in a way that is above themselves, that's higher than whatever conflict they have going on, because now all they care about is making that music together. Along with that, they have the narrative aspect. One of Heartbeat's really cool programs is their all-star band, which has been performing around the country now, and they perform their socially conscious music in a way that they've been able to reach audiences of up to 1,000, right? And more than 1,000, including at the Paris Center, right? Paris Peace Center. So this is at, what was this, your March retreat last year? And then these are a few members of their all-star band, which he'll probably tell you a lot more about later. One of the other groups that I work with is the Ain Bustan Arab Jewish Waldorf School. This is very cool for me to actually be speaking about Waldorf education in the birthplace of Waldorf education. I was brought up in Waldorf education as a child. Great. Which, in my opinion, is a wonderful method of education. And everyone has their own opinions about it or whatever it may be. But the great thing about Waldorf education is that, particularly from a young age, music plays an extremely crucial role in the raising of those children. The intention of Waldorf schooling from a young age is to create an environment of imagination, to create an environment where you don't judge each other, to create an environment where you're not so focused on what people look like. In fact, one of the practices of Waldorf education is that they have dolls and they draw people without faces, because the idea is that we don't care about what we look like because we're all people. It creates this mutual understanding of respect and care for each other. I just really like this picture. This kid found a worm. It's just like my favorite picture I've ever taken. These children come together and they sing in this environment almost everything, whether it's mealtime or whatever classes or whatever, they sing throughout everything. And their founder, his name's Amir Shlomian. Amir is a peace activist as well as an educator and a musician who founded this school with this idea that he wanted to find a place where his children could learn in a Waldorf environment. He's a trained Waldorf educator, where they weren't separated from their Arab neighbors. He wanted them to come together and not only study together, but he wanted them to speak the same language. So the amazing thing at Ain Bustan is all of their classes, everything, they have one Hebrew-speaking teacher and one Arabic-speaking teacher. And the children learn from both of them so that the children grow up speaking each other's languages so that there's no language barrier between them. And then along with that, he rewrote all of the Waldorf songs to be in both Arabic, Hebrew, English, and then he even wrote, made up a few of his own, put them all together, and created this environment where the kids are always singing together and always experiencing the other culture as if there isn't some big barrier between them. One of my favorite things about Ain Bustan, though, is that through the children, they get the parents involved. This isn't some sort of the parents force their kids to go interact with each other, whatever that organization may be. This is the sort of organization where they just want a good education for their children, so they send them to Ain Bustan, and through that they create these different programs, these different dialogue groups for the parents to interact with each other. One of the other important points of using these grassroots efforts, and particularly using creative efforts like music, is that it marginalizes extremism. And I want to make sure that I'm doing well on time, because I want to speak a little bit about that. Political efforts don't marginalize extremism, they combat extremism. And for some reason, there often seems to be this idea that the way to combat extremism is to do so violently. One of my favorite examples that I like to use is my own home state of Colorado. Has anybody here ever been to Colorado? All right, it's a beautiful place, right? I'm from Boulder, and Boulder is situated above the clouds. We have 300 days of sunshine a year, and when you have 300 days of sunshine a year and you live above the clouds, we call that heaven. Colorado is a beautiful state, and it's a beautiful place. Shortly after World War I, however, it was not. As the soldiers were coming back from World War I and got back to Colorado, they discovered that the entire state government was run by the KKK. They ran the state government, the local government in Denver, in Colorado Springs, and all the major cities. For many people, this wasn't okay. But the reason why the KKK took over the government wasn't because of rampant racism amongst all the people, but because they were helping the economy, they were building hospitals, or whatever it may be. That's often a way that extremists are able to work themselves into the institution, is by doing something that seems like they're really being helpful, but in the process, they're able to institute their racist model, or whatever it may be. So within, I believe, a decade, they no longer ran the state. And it wasn't done through political efforts. It was done through grassroots efforts from people on the ground who weren't okay with the fact that the state was run by the KKK. And this was done in a very short period of time, but it was done through a grassroots effort, not through a political effort. It wasn't done through political decrees. As we saw, it still existed in other states in the country. But for me, in Colorado, it strikes a little closer to home, and we were able to eradicate it very quickly. So the other thing that I want to share is that this type of peacemaking, this musical, creative peacemaking, empowers women and girls, which most of us can agree is usually not a bad idea. In most situations, right? One of my favorite groups that I spoke about earlier is the Shinny Choir. This group is so phenomenal. These young ladies are not only extremely talented, but extremely intelligent and extremely compassionate human beings who, just from coming together and singing in this environment where they don't have this concept of who's an Arab and who's not. You can't even tell. You go in there. This is one of my favorite things about going to Ain Bustan or seeing the efforts with Heartbeat is a lot of time you can't tell who's an Arab and who's a Jew. They like a lot of them actually do look alike, and it's so silly to have this idea that well, these are the Arabs over here and these are the Jews over here. That distinction often just doesn't exist when you go to these groups. So at the Shinny Choir, it's really phenomenal how that's not discussed amongst them. They don't care about that. They discuss the conflict, sure. They discuss the fact that their lives are different because of what culture they came from. But then they sing together. And when they sing together, none of that matters. Not only do they come together and sing in these groups, they're actually a world-renowned group now. They've made their way to some pretty amazing stages. In the interest of time, I'm not going to share this video that I have here. But if I did, what you would see is them performing for the Pope, which was one of their coolest venues. And it's very cool to see. The Pope loved it. And he went up and, a couple of the girls are Catholic, of course, and so they did the whole kissing the ring and everything like that. And he kind of like shooed them off, like, don't worry about that, and just held their shoulders like, you guys are so great. He was just so into it and so affected by these girls singing together. And they sing classical as well as contemporary kind of arrangements. They're all in a classical choral style. They were founded by a man named Uri Ben David, who I often refer to as like a superhero. He's just this phenomenal person who, also a Waldorf educator actually originally, as well as a classically trained clarinetist, who decided that he wanted to see this sort of effort, this sort of musical effort where he was bringing together Jews and Arabs to learn classical music. And he figured that the way to get them together was by saying, we're going to teach them classical music, and it's going to be high quality. This is going to be like the premier academy in the Jezreel Valley for classical music. And so everyone wanted to send them there. So it wasn't through parents wanting to reach out and make peace efforts that their children ended up in this choir or in the other ensembles at the music center. It was through just wanting to teach them classical music. And through there, they did this guerrilla peacemaking that has been so amazingly successful, not just among the girls in the choir, not just among the other children in the academy, but among the parents as well, who all of a sudden get involved in the well-being of their children's education. So the other thing that I want to talk about, why this works so well, before I give it over to Aaron to really discuss how he's doing the work from the ground. The reason why music is such an effective peacemaker, the reason why grassroots efforts are so effective is because they're active. This is particularly, there are many in this group who are of a younger generation like myself. And we're often referred to as a very apathetic group. We're always accused of apathy for some reason. And for me, the reason is because talk is cheap. It's wonderful to theorize and to develop these models in which we can grow from, but only if action is taken afterwards. There's a difference between standing up in front of a group like yourselves or even standing behind a video camera and creating this sort of environment and actually rolling up your sleeves and getting your hands dirty. There's a difference between discussing what can be done in a political realm, what can be done between different governments, or even talking about groups such as Aaron's Heartbeat, or groups such as the Amos Stein Waldorf School, or the Shinny Choir. There's a difference between that and actually going and doing the work with them. One of my story that I often like to share at my different talks that I've given, and I just want to make sure I've got good time. Yeah, a little bit, huh? We're over time. Well, we are. Oh, okay, sorry. Well, then, really quickly, while I was filming my documentary, I was invited to come to an Arab Waldorf school. I should explain, previous to making this trip, I had never been in an experience where I was the only Jew in a group of Arabs. It had never happened in my entire life. I was always afraid of that experience, entirely for the reason that I had never actually done it. I'd never had the experience of being with an Arabic family, just because that's what I grew up in. So I was invited to come to an Arabic Waldorf school, and I was able to use that excuse not to bring the video camera, because one of my big frustrations while I was there was I was always the guy behind the camera. I never got to be involved in the actual work that the groups were doing. So because there were no Jews involved and there was no actual dialogue happening, I could use that as the excuse not to take the camera along. So I went to this Arabic Waldorf school, and I was invited to come teach music for a day, particularly to the third grade class. And it was a great experience because I don't speak any Arabic. They don't speak any English. their Hebrew is like okay, and my Hebrew is awful. So it was all through just understanding each other somehow. And one of the best experiences I had was the teacher took me over to a little boy and said, he's always wanted to learn piano, but we don't have a piano teacher. Even though we have this piano in the classroom, he's always wanted to learn piano. Could you teach him something? I was like, all right, I have like 3 minutes right now. So I sat down with him and I took the boy over and I showed him how to find the middle C and I showed him how to make a scale and taught him how to find different scales off of that in like 5 minutes. And then they went on with the rest of the day. At the end of the day, as the bell rang or whatever it was and all the children ran off to go find their parents, this child ran up to the piano and he plunked out C and started playing out his scale. And that's the moment. That experience of actually doing one thing where I had that interaction with this 8, 9-year-old boy. That's when you feel like you've done something. That's when you feel like you've had an effect. So thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Amitai. That was an excellent presentation and much more than we had anticipated in terms of the performance aspect. I think also really helped.